Welcome to A Line Through Time, where I have now been doing this for an entire decade. 10 years ago today, I released the first episode of A Line Through Time, which covered the Sonic franchise on its 25th anniversary because I'm an insane person. Since then, I've returned to the franchise once more after Mania and Forces released, and haven't spoken on its timeline since. But to make these big anniversaries for both series special, I'm going to redo all of it from the start, so you don't need to watch the previous hour of decade-old content to follow along this time. Because I'm an insane person. Things have changed since 2017. Most prominently, Sega has released an official timeline of the major entries, so that's a good place to start rebuilding our own timeline. It's actually quite satisfying to see how many of the entries that weren't as explicit in their placement are still in the order I've asserted in the past. The classic era begins with the original lineup: Sonic 1, Sonic CD, Sonic 2, and Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Next comes Sonic Mania, then Mania Plus, which occurs right after Classic Sonic's part in Sonic Forces. Sega did not specify his origin point for generations here, sadly. We'll get to that later. Next comes Sonic Superstars, then Sonic 4 to transition into the modern era. It's worth noting that this order still allows one of my more out there ideas from the previous timeline to still work, which I'll discuss later. The modern era begins with the Dreamcast games: Sonic Adventure, Sonic Shuffle, which is shocking to see on a list of the important entries, and Sonic Adventure 2. Sonic Advance 2 is next, with no mention of Advance 1. We'll slot that in later. Then Sonic Heroes, Shadow the Hedgehog, Sonic Battle, Sonic Advance 3, and Sonic Rush. I previously placed Rush before Advance 3 due to Gemel's absence, whom the ongoing IDW comics have as a consistent presence, but it's ultimately a minor point that doesn't outright contradict anything, so it's fine. Next comes Sonic 06, which doesn't have any new explanation for Sonic and Blaze's lack of acknowledgement of one another. Just have to chalk it up to bad writing, I guess. Sonic Riders comes next, which I had placed before 06 because of release order. I'm curious what the reason was for this placement then. It's followed by Sonic Rush Adventure, Sonic Riders Zero Gravity, Sonic Unleashed, Sonic Colors, Sonic X Shadow Generations, and Sonic Free Riders. I had Free Riders in release order coming before Colors. What a game to have as Sonic's second adventure after turning 16, eh? Next comes Sonic Lost World, Team Sonic Racing, then Sonic Forces. I guess they figured the gang wouldn't go karting with Eggman right after the war he waged across the planet in Forces, which is completely fair. Oddly, they include the Sonic Frontiers prologue Divergence on here, but not any of the other animated shorts. But after Frontiers itself, we're all caught up. So just from what Sega included in their timeline, this is how it looks. It's not decanonized anything here, and the canonical IDW comics routinely call back to very specific games not included on here, so let's get to putting those back into place before we discuss the multimedia push, then revisit my ideas for the series Timeframe and other oddities. First, the classic era had a bunch of side games ignored for the official timeline. Sega Sonic Cosmo Fighter is a space shooter about Eggman trying to capture animals in space, Sonic pursuing in a spaceship. Since Tails isn't here when he would surely be the one to provide Sonic's transport, I see this as occurring before Sonic meets Tails, but probably after CD so Sonic's had time to build up his heroic reputation so he can be entrusted with this tech. Sega's Sonic the Hedgehog introduced Ray and Mighty, who were captured alongside Sonic. Tails is absent from this one too. Eggman seeing Sonic as enough of a threat to capture him but not kill him suggests this comes before he starts making robots in Sonic's image as well. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 8-bits is a different game from its main 16-bit counterpart, with a different story and selection of zones. Tails is here, but there are only 6 emeralds, with the 7th being considered lost until 16-bit Sonic 2, placing 8 bits before 16-bit. And since both carry the name Sonic 2, I'll assume this is the final adventure before 2 proper. And alongside this, let's insert the pair's first meeting onto the timeline because of its significance. Sonic Chaos features only 6 emeralds like the first game, and since Tails is featured, this slots in between CD and 2. Sonic Spinball has a story and features Tails as well as 16 Chaos Emeralds. Presumably, Eggman created a bunch of fakes and forgot it could be done by SA2 due to all the CTE from all of his fights with Sonic, which requires him to have had possession of an emerald before, which only occurs this early in Sonic Chaos and Sonic 2 8-bit, setting this between Chaos and the 2s. Sonic Triple Trouble introduces Knack/Fang the Weasel/Sniper/Hunter and features Knuckles. Knuckles' involvement sets this after S3K, and Fang cameos as an illusion in Mania, which means he must be known to Sonic and Eggman already, setting this between them. Knuckles Chaotix is set on an island that arose from the sea soon after S3K, and marks the first time Knuckles isn't tricked by Eggman, so it's safe to place it after Triple Trouble, where he was again tricked. I don't think it would go after Mania, since Mania ushers in a sort of modern classic era where the retro by design games go, so I'll put it before Mania. And on that note of modern classic, I'll put classic Sonic's origin point in Generations just before Mania, since Forces comes in the middle of the Mania story, so it has to go before all of that. Sonic Labyrinth lacks tails and only has 6 emeralds. The Japanese manual mentions Eggman having lost several times to Sonic. Whether that's individual battles or just whole adventures is unclear. Eggman steals Sonic's shoes while he's napping, suggesting he's still not taking him seriously enough to kill him on the spot. It makes the most sense to come before CD. Tails' adventure takes place before Tails met Sonic. There isn't really anything to suggest when, but considering Tails is being bullied by 2 goobers when he first meets Sonic, I think he needs time to come down from his high after saving the day here, so I'll put it before Cosmo Fighter. I'll cover the other Tails game in a bit. Sonic the Fighters features Knuckles and Espio, suggesting it comes after Chaotix. It also introduces Bark and Bean, whose illusory selves in Mania only make sense if they're known to Sonic and Eggman, so Fighters comes first. Bean is based on another game by Sega AM2 called Dynamite Ducks, and the Japanese manual for Fighters says Bean is the son of Bin from Ducks, and his second palette is even based on Bin. One of the comics has since referenced this somewhat indirectly as well. This means that game occurs in the Sonic universe. It's most likely before any of the Sonic games, given Bean doesn't exist in the other game, and his father looks about his age now. On a related note, another Sega game called Flicky introduced the titular bird creature, who went on to appear as one of the captive animals in Sonic 1, and then had its species fleshed out in the next game we're discussing. Flicky released a few months ahead of Sonic 1, so let's put it there on the timeline too. Sonic 3D Blast features Sonic, Tails and Knuckles as allies, so it's after Triple Trouble, but any more than that is hard to tell. It released after the Fighters, so it's probably best to go there. Sonic Blast, yes, they released games by those 2 names just over a month apart, has Sonic and Knuckles team up against Eggman. Tails is completely absent. So, might I propose, Tails Sky Patrol sees Tails go on a solo adventure while Sonic's off on one of his own. The only adventures Sonic has without Tails after Sonic 2 came out are Labyrinth and Blast, both opening with Eggman plotting against Sonic while he's napping, oddly. In this game's comic sequel, Tails says Sonic was off on another adventure at the time, but I don't think Sonic's shoes being stolen would qualify as just another adventure, given the gravity of the situation. But him and Knuckles teaming up is more of an average adventure by this point, so I'm putting these 2 together. Sonic R came out next, with a story of little substance, so we're putting it before Blast. The reason being that Generations has Sonic get plucked from the past while in Green Hill. The only game to feature Green Hill, after Tails' introduction, with the classic designs, is Sonic Blast. So unless we assume Sonic takes regular jaunts through Green Hill, I propose that classic Sonic in Generations comes from Sonic Blast, in spite of the different Green Hill aesthetics between the 2 games. And finally, Sonic Pocket Adventure bridges the gap between the classic era and Sonic 4, as Eggman switches between his classic and modern designs partway through the game, and Sonic and friends have their classic designs with their modern eye colours. And with games like Generations, Forces and Superstars confirming the classic designs as being canon to their younger selves, this transition is canonical. We'll be returning to the classic era once we get to the IDW comics, because you'd be surprised how many set in that era there are. As for the modern era, we have the conspicuously absent Sonic Advance 1. It obviously comes before Advance 2. Amy's introduction in Adventure 1 suggests she hasn't seen Sonic in a while, and Tails is awarded an emerald for saving Station Square in Adventure 1, so Advance can't occur until he loses possession of the emeralds in Adventure 2. I'm inclined to assume this is between Adventure 2 and Advance 2. Yes, the moon was shot in half in SA2 and it's a stage here, but Sega only remembers that major event less than half of the time, so here it goes. Sonic Pinball Party has a story for some reason and features Cream, so it has to come after Advance 2. It's set in Casinopolis from Adventure 1, so it makes sense to pin it as close to that game as it possibly can be. Sonic Jump, the original version, has a story but nothing of substance, so we just put it after the last game released. Sonic Rivals released in the wake of Sonic 06, depicting Silver's first meeting with Sonic and friends in the new timeline, and retconning Eggman Nega, calm your tits there, as being Eggman's descendant from Silver's future and not his Sol Dimension counterpart. Because of this, it has to occur between 06 and Silver's next story appearance in colours on the DS. I see no reason to not put it right after 06, allowing Rivals plot to effectively replace 06 in the new timeline. Sonic and the Secret Rings and Sonic Rivals 2 both released between Rush Adventure and Unleashed, so they may as well go in that order. Sonic and the Black Knight came after Unleashed, so we'll likewise place it in release order. Sonic Jump's remake has a new plot that's still very basic, so we'll put it in release order. Sonic Runners is likewise very simple, as is the sequel Runner's Adventure. Despite releasing after Forces, Adventure is not set in the wake of Eggman's global war, so it goes before that era. Sonic Forces Episode Shadow DLC takes place shortly before the main game begins. It also reveals the backstory of Infinite from a couple of months prior. The murder of Sonic the Hedgehog features a reference to and cameo by Sage, so it must come after Frontiers. Sonic also references the speed boost from maxing his ring count in his last adventure, so nothing substantial comes between Frontiers and Murder. Since it released before Sonic Dream Team and Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, I think they go in that order too. I'll discuss Frontiers more in a bit as part of the IDW discussion. And the most recent game is Sonic Rumble Party, which has a premise more than a plot. Sage has presence in the game, but then so do the Smurfs and Godzilla, so I'm just putting it at the end in absence of anything else to draw from. I'm leaving Sonic Chronicles The Dark Brotherhood out this time. This game caused so many headaches for Sega, did not review well, and its cliffhanger remains unresolved. Also, Knuckles says he's the last Echidna in Frontiers, telling us Shade is either dead or non-existent. Safe to say, it's not canon anymore. Now that the games are done with, we can move on to the animated shorts that accompany certain games. Sonic Night of the Werehog and its Sonicless sequel, Ghost Tale, could be canon just unseen during that game, similar to the Sonic cameo in Shadow Generations. But given how Sonic's transformation is triggered by the full moon here instead of general nighttime, on top of it not being alluded to in the game, I'm leaning towards it being non-canon. Come Join the Eggman Empire isn't a story, just an in-universe ad from during Eggman's reign in Forces. Technically it happens during the game's time skip, likely towards the end once he's taken over most of the planet. Sonic Mania Adventures opens with classic Sonic's return from Forces, just like in Mania Plus, but otherwise diverges from that plot entirely. It's possible this is supposed to be a separate adventure, but the way we go right into it from Sonic's return suggests this is an alternate story and isn't canon to the games. Papercraft Mania Adventures are probably set soon after Mania Plus. Team Sonic Racing Overdrive just depicts a race, and Team Sonic Racing Papercraft Edition is similar. They might fit into TSR's story, but there's so little story here, it's barely worth thinking about. Chow in Space is just about Sonic protecting a Chow while it sleepwalks during a dream of space combat. It's really hard to say where it goes, so I'm inclined to put it after the last release, Team Sonic Racing. That game isn't in release order, but the peaceful vibe here works better before the war in Forces and all that follows. An Eggman Carol sees Sonic and friends trying to make Eggman change his ways with a Christmas Carol setup. I doubt Sonic's friends would agree to this after Forces, given how some of them hold it against Sonic for not killing Eggman in the comics. Cubot is around, so it has to be after Colors. And Silver shows Eggman a future where he's died, but the Babylon Rogues are still around, suggesting it's fairly soon, and Eggman is presumed dead after Forces, so I'd put this shortly before Forces. Sonic Colors Rise of the Wisps is essentially a more fleshed out take on the Sweet Mountain section. It only adds narrative to the levels, not contradicting any story material as far as I can tell. Sonic Superstars Trio of Trouble takes place prior to the game in question, depicting where Eggman's sketch from the intro comes from. Sonic X Shadow Generations Dark Beginnings details Shadow's journey up to the arc where Shadow Generations begins. It also shows ML's rampage aboard the arc from Battle's backstory, but as it's presented in a dream that Shadow even notes as being inaccurate in other ways, it's not clear how much of it played out this way canonically. Chow Tales and A Chow Tales Halloween focus on Sonic raising a group of Chow. The Halloween one comes second since the Chow that evolved into a Sonic Chow in the first one returns here. The comic Sonic X Shadow Generations X Chow features the Sonic and Shadow Chow during the events of Generations, indicating that these shorts come before Generations. Whenabouts is hard to say. The first spans multiple seasons, so Sonic would surely have a bunch of adventures in between, and Halloween would come almost a year later given the first series ends in winter. If nothing else, we can confirm that the Shadow Chow takes after his idol.
Disgusting black creatures, get out of my sight.
For simplicity, I'll just put them right before Generations. Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, the animation, is just a race where Shadow wins, no story. And while we're on animation, let's discuss Sonic Prime, the streaming show released naturally on Netflix. The show is supposedly canonical, but it really doesn't fit. The characterization is off in several ways, the voice cast is completely different, unlike Sonic Boom's multimedia aspects. The show presents Big and Rouge as core parts of Sonic's friend group. Sonic is surprised by robots not powered by flickies despite having seen many since SA2. Sonic doesn't at all think of Metal Sonic when the show introduces its own version. And there are other oddities like Green Hill being spoken of as if it's the entirety of Sonic's homeworld, and the reference-heavy Flint era making no reference to this multiversal cataclysm. I don't care what anyone at Sega says, this show doesn't work as canon. But you know what does generally work as canon? The comics. There are a few manga that have released over the years, but I believe those are all adaptations or partial adaptations of the games. We're looking for the real stuff. Sonic Colors Comics is a 4-page prequel to Colors Ultimate. Team Sonic Racing One Shot is yet another simple race that doubles as a showcase of mechanics. Game mechanics, not car mechanics. Might be canon, might not. Sonic Forces received a 4-part prequel comic of the same name. Issue 1 follows a random soldier in the Resistance during an attack by Eggman, presumably during the time skip. Issue 2 depicts Eggman testing out the Phantom Ruby's power before everything kicks off. Issue 3 leads directly into episode Shadow. Issue 4 shows Eggman discovering the Phantom Ruby and recruiting Infinite Squad. So the full Forces story goes: Issue 4, Issue 2, Infinite's backstory, Issue 3, episode Shadow, Forces prologue, Issue 1, come join the Eggman Empire, and the rest of Forces. And then we have the aftermath. In 2017, IDW began a new Sonic comic series written by Archie Sonic alum Ian Flynn for most of its arcs. Flynn has since gone on to write for the games, inserting references to comic original characters like Tangle and Whisper, who have also appeared as DLC in Crossworlds. Lore manager Chris Hernandez confirmed in 2023 that these comics are canonical to the games, so let's begin. The Neo Metal Sonic arc picks up in the aftermath of Forces. In issue 4, Sonic says it's been 7 months since he was captured by Eggman, placing this 1 month after Forces ends. The 2019 annual features a collection of short stories set in the wake of the first arc, and Tangle tells Sonic and Tails about her story early in the next arc. Arc 2 is the Metal Virus arc, spanning issues 13 to 32, with the 2020 annual filling in some missing details from the arc. Issue 21 occurs after the Tangle and Whisper miniseries. The Metal Virus doesn't come up at all during the mini, despite Tangle only telling Sonic, according to an editor's note, about the annual story that occurs sometime before the mini, right after Sonic's infection early in the second arc. Given the lack of connection to the Metal Virus arc, we can easily imagine she tells him about the mini too, since we don't actually see her telling him anything, so we're placing it between the two arcs. The 5th anniversary edition release of issue 1 included a new short set after Metal Virus, but other specifics are unclear. It came out in the middle of Urban Warfare, but that's a tricky place to put it. We do see Sonic run off to find out what comes next at the end of issue 32, the very end of the Metal Virus arc, so I think him going around to places he's been to before to see how they're faring and happening upon this event makes sense. After this comes the Eggman's Legacy arc, starting with issue 33. It consists of Chow Races and Badnik bases, Test Run, Zeti Hunt, Trial by Fire, and a couple of one-offs before issue 50. Dr. Starline is tossed into a portal towards the end of Metal Virus, resurfacing during the first part of this arc after the events of the Bad Guys miniseries, so that goes in between. The Imposter Syndrome miniseries introduces Surge and Kitsunami right before their first encounter with Sonic in issue 50 of the main book. More on this later. The Scrapnik Island mini leads into issue 57, where it's implied it's been some time since issue 52 from the last sub-arc, allowing Scrapnik to fit in well after 56. The Urban Warfare sub-arc spans from 57 to 61, after which the Clean Sweep arc begins. Writer Evan Stanley has said that Frontiers slots in just before issue 68, but admits it's not perfect. After all, in issue 69, Eggman makes clear his most recent defeat was the Eggperial City arc, which capped off with issue 61. And in issue 67, the last thing to supposedly occur before Frontiers, Surge and Kit show up at Restoration HQ claiming to want to change, which Sonic and Amy don't trust at all, so it's difficult to imagine them and Tails going off on some random adventure right after. Another option is between issues 75 and 76, just after the destruction of Restoration HQ, but before Sonic and the Chaotix investigate Clutch's whereabouts. It's also not ideal since this still isn't a great time to go on random adventures, and the Emerald Tails has had since issue 68 is stolen in 75, making its presence in Frontiers tricky. We could go all the way up to between issues 83 and 84, right before Sage makes her comic debut, but Rouge holds the Silver Emerald between the 2022 annual and issue 80, and it hasn't been retrieved by the latest issue, 87, so it can't go there. The only other place I can see it working is during the Misadventures, issues 62 to 66, section between Urban Warfare and Phantom Rider, essentially a series of mini-stories between the big arcs. In 62, Amy returns an Echidna idol she got from Rouge in 61, so after that. Sonic and Blaze hang out in a backup story in 63 and 64, so before or after. Then Knuckles and the Chaotix work to take back something the Babylon Rogues steal in 65 and 66. Then Surge and Kit show up in 67. I'd say it's better between 64 and 65, so that Knuckles' time away from Angel Island in Frontiers is why the Rogues think now's a good time to steal from him. Eggman will still call issue 61 his latest defeat in issue 69, but I don't see any major reasons the gang shouldn't go on this adventure here, so my placement for Frontiers is between issues 64 and 65. And right before it is the prequel comic Sonic Frontiers prologue Convergence. It takes place alongside Divergence, showing Sonic's group setting off to the Starfall Islands. From here, no game featuring the emeralds can occur, as Sonic and Tails acquired the yellow one in 68, it's stolen around 75, and remains stolen alongside the rest by the most recent issue, 87. 6 of them have been claimed by issue 80, including the green, which Shadow has in Dream Team outside of the Dream World, so that game has to occur before issue 80 or after the current arc ends. No emeralds appear in Murder or Cross Worlds, so they're free to go wherever. Dream Team can go basically anywhere as long as the green emerald isn't accounted for. I'll keep it at the end for convenience's sake, since anything else would be pure conjecture, while the only fact is that Shadow has the green emerald. I don't know where Crossworlds can slot in without causing problems, and allowing Sonic to have not seen Sage in a while by her comic debut. There was a screenshot circulating of the game where Tails mentions clean sweepstakes from a supposed pre-release build of the game that was changed for the final build. I cannot confirm the validity of it, but in the absence of anything else, I think we can use it to place Crossworlds after clean sweep, since that is supposedly the time frame Ian Flynn had in mind. Tails taking part in this game instead of worrying about the emerald stolen at the end of clean sweep suggests it comes after the current story arc, since it's still unresolved. The murder of Sonic the Hedgehog depicts the retirement of the conductor right before he and his wife head off for a holiday in Spagonia. This seems like it should occur prior to their cameo in issue 81, where they're visiting Sequin. His wife appears with their daughter travelling to watch clean sweepstakes in issue 71, the conductor conspicuously absent, suggesting he may still be working by then. In Murder, Sonic refers to Frontiers as his latest adventure. I think Phantom Rider counts as an adventure, and Murder doesn't fit right after Phantom Rider, given how the Chaotix interrogate him over his role in that plot in the next arc, while Vector and SBO are completely chill in Murder. Plus, a happy birthday party right after Restoration HQ got wiped out isn't a good look for Amy. So I'm going to assume the conductor is with his wife and daughter during Phantom Rider, just off screen, maybe with his other kids, and place the murder of Sonic the Hedgehog between issues 66 and 67, right before Surge and Kit show up. Blaze causes some issues, saying in Murder that she's only here for the party and will return to her dimension right after, but her holiday arc begins in 63 and is still ongoing, so we just have to ignore that comment. Her holiday is first suggested by Knuckles in the 2022 annual. I don't think anything suggests that the stories in the annual aren't all set around the same time. In Guardians, Amy references issue 47, and another grand adventure for Jet the Hawk is set in the wake of Whisper going solo in issue 45, so the time frame appears consistent. Thanks to Guardians, we know this is between 47 and 63. Amy and Tangle are already telling Sonic about their adventure at the end of 47, so I'm putting this right after, assuming they continue the discussion in more depth at Cream's place. This placement even explains why Cream doesn't go on the camping trip. She's at Hero Camp in the annual. In Endless Summer, Jewel references Tangle and Whisper being busy with Diamond Cutter work since issues 63 and 64. Some time has passed, but Phantom Rider hasn't, since this is the HQ that's destroyed in that story's climax, so Endless Summer is between 68 and 69. Sonic also mentions having had 900 adventures, which is a nod to the 900th Adventure Special, which celebrated Sonic's 900th English language comic book issue. Said issue is set after Metal Virus, and Blaze is casually sightseeing with Cream. Recall, Blaze's holiday is proposed by Knuckles in the 2022 annual, then she goes on a world tour with Silver in issue 64. They return in 76, and only then split up to do their own things. In issue 63, Blaze and Sonic have been travelling together for a bit, him showing her around his world, so I have to think she could have been on that trip with Cream around this time, before she formally decides to travel the world as a holiday, especially since her story in the annual ends with her visiting Cream, so I'm putting the 900th adventure between Urban Warfare and Misadventures. Spring Broken occurs after the 2022 annual. It released right as Phantom Rider was starting up. Presumably, Rough and Tumble haven't started their legitimate business thing from issue 77, which is right after Phantom Rider. During Phantom Rider, Vector says, "You skunks are back for seconds" to the duo, calling back specifically to issue 48, where it seems the two teams haven't met yet, suggesting they've not met since. But placing this right after Restoration HQ was destroyed doesn't feel right. I think the best place is shortly before Phantom Rider, the incident here not being counted as a fight by either side, so the later callback still works on some level. It can't go right before Phantom Rider though, since that puts it after the summer special, or between Surge showing up at HQ and that special. I'm moving it to before Surge arrives, just before Murder of Sonic the Hedgehog, to have some space before Endless Summer. In Winter Jam, the conductor and his wife are seen participating in a game show, so this is presumably set after his retirement, since he'd likely be too busy with work before then. The gang also obtained the Purple Emerald during this story, so it has to be before it's shown held by the current villain in issue 80. No, there's no explanation for how this emerald ends up stolen, as only the yellow and silver are explicitly called out. And if you're wondering about the seasons, this one is set during summer. The winter thing is just part of Orbot and Cubot's game show. In fact, Sonic calls it an endless summer, hinting that it's the same summer as the special of that name. So I'm putting this one between Endless Summer and Phantom Rider. The 2024 annual has 3 stories. Hero's Calling takes place between issue 75, mentioned by Surge, and her attempt at heroics in 78. She says what happened in 75 just happened, so probably between 75 and 76. For My Destiny ends on To Be Continued in issue 80, despite not doing that. So I guess it can go just after 80, before the stage's set begins. And Shattered Diamond seems to lead into issue 57. The 2022 Free Comic Book Day issue has Knuckles say the last time Sonic was on Angel Island was during Metal Virus, and Tails mentions what's been done with Restoration HQ, setting this after the new HQ's introduction in issue 37, but before this issue is referenced in issue 62. That's a wide span of time, so we need some conjecture. The recap of the main comic included in the issue covers up to the end of Imposter Syndrome and leads into issue 50, so I'm putting this here in the lead up to issue 50. So now, Imposter Syndrome needs some elaboration. Issue 1 is set during Trial by Fire, as we see Surge start the fire, and she causes trouble in Central City, which Vector is seen reading about at the end of Trial by Fire. Issue 4 depicts Starline's conquest of the Eggperial City to set up issue 49. In between, we have 2022's annual and FCBD issue, so we'll put issues 2 and 3 between them since they lead directly into one another with very little time in between. The Halloween special one-shot is tough to place because of how self-contained it is. Presumably, it's in the same year as the other seasonal specials, just later on. With Road to 100 looking to be one big, mostly unbroken narrative, I'll put this before that, just before the Sequin trip, since that's really where this new saga begins. The Chaotix 30th anniversary issue has the Chaotix explaining a past caper on the anniversary of said event. They never specify which anniversary, but I personally get the impression it's the first, from the lack of specificity, and how the conductor and his wife cameo in the flashback with their daughter appearing not much younger than in the present. But other than that, it's hard to say. Sonic says long time no see to Vector, who's been popping up a lot over the last few years. Relevantly, he was in Phantom Rider and its immediate aftermath. And I don't think Amy should be taking Sonic on a museum tour right after the HQ was destroyed. I'm putting it just before Phantom Rider, so that Sonic last saw Vector during Murder, and Surge's arrival and the Summer arc have occurred by now. There are also a number of comics set during the Classic era. Seasons of Chaos, the trade featuring the 30th anniversary special and the Free Comic Book Day 2021 issue, takes place sometime after Mania Plus, with Eggman having rebuilt Heavy King shortly before this, and Amy commenting on Mighty's adventures, plural, with Sonic. Amy comments on being around at the very start this time, which could suggest games where she's on the core roster can't occur before this, but Sonic R and the fighters need to occur before this due to Metal Knuckles, Bean and Bark being present, so she's only talking about adventures, not races or tournaments. So Superstars has yet to occur, supported by Tails not being familiar with Fang's Marvelous Queen. Papercraft Edition hasn't occurred yet either, since Amy, Mighty and Ray all feature in one of them. So the comic comes between Mania Plus and Papercraft. This special includes other stories, one depicting Sonic learning to drive, suggesting Sonic Drift comes after this. And Eggman's birthday includes the hard-boiled heavies again, and the 4th story has Amy knowing Mighty and Ray, so these all seem to occur around the same time. As for the Drift games, Sonic already has a car before this, so he's presumably learned to drive by now. Drift 2 features Tails and Fang, the latter driving Marvelous Queen, so Tails should be relatively familiar with it by now. So I believe both Drift games occur after Seasons of Chaos. They could go before or after Superstars. I'm putting them before, since Superstars is currently the endpoint of the Classic era. Purely personal preference for that, but that's how it is. The Fang the Hunter miniseries ends with Fang being hired for Superstars, so before Trio of Trouble. Bean makes clear Fang's gang has been hired by Eggman several times, including Seasons of Chaos. Drift 2 can probably add this to the count, so I'm putting this after that. Sonic, Knuckles and Eggman don't believe in the idea of there being more than 7 Chaos Emeralds, suggesting past examples of more have been retconned to only have 7. Sonic Superstars, Fang's Big Break, is a digital comic that depicts Eggman and Fang's arrival on North Star Island and their first encounter with Trip, taking place between the Fang Mini and Trio of Trouble. Amy's 30th anniversary special has Fang show up after he and his crew botched a job for Eggman and got locked up for it, but the exact nature of the job is unspecified. Only Fang is in Superstars, and the Fang Mini led directly into Superstars material. And all the characters from Seasons of Chaos show up and Amy knows them, so it's after that. This has to be a new job after Seasons of Chaos or after Superstars. And since Eggman still recruits Fang in Superstars and never again afterwards, I'm inclined to say this was the final straw for both of them, and this is all after Superstars. Knuckles' 30th anniversary special is set not long after Superstars, acting as a sequel to that game. Maybe Fang's botched job was around the same time as this. Tails' 30th anniversary special has him and Sonic return to Flicky Island from Sonic 3D Blast sometime after the game, seemingly after being away for a while. Without anything concrete to go on, I'll just say it makes sense to put these 3 anniversary specials together at the end of the classic era, with Tails' issue making for a nice one to close it out, bringing us back to focus on that central partnership at the core of this franchise. Amusingly, all the classic era comics are set after classic Sonic's involvement in Generations and Forces, where he was mute, but he is now much chattier. I don't think it means anything, I just find that funny. And with that, every canonical Sonic comic has been included, I'm fairly certain. Sadly, I don't believe the crossovers with DC and Godzilla are considered canonical by Sega. Shame, there was some good lore in there. Lex and Rouge fucked, and since it's kinda tied to the comics, the Chaotix Case Files comes next. Sage is around, so this is post-Frontiers. And more, the Chaotix don't know her until this, so it's before Crossworlds. I'll put it after Dream Team to keep it simple. And we'll cap it all off with the major backstory events in the order the official timeline places them. In prehistory, we have the Dark Gaia/Light Gaia cycle, then the Frontiers backstory. Tens of thousands of years ago, we have another Gaia cycle. Tens of thousands of years to thousands of years ago, we have the arrival of the Babylon Rogues ancestors. Thousands of years ago has the collapse of the Echidna civilization. 2,000 years ago, the Black Arms bring their flying temples to Earth, and we also have Emil's creation. 50 years ago, Shadow is created, Emil goes on a rampage, and the Ark is attacked by Gun. 10 years ago, the creation of Solaris occurs, or doesn't in the current timeline. And then we reach the modern day. Now we can discuss the time frame. This part is much more speculative and somewhat vibes based. Not much has changed since the last time I did this, but we do have this. IDW Sonic Issue 1, Page 1, Panel 1, Caption Box 1, Sonic the Hedgehog has spent years fighting the forces of Dr. Eggman. This confirms that the series spans multiple years, despite Sega always listing Sonic as 15, even after his next birthday in Generations. This is supported by Little Planet from Sonic CD and Sonic 4 only appearing once every year, meaning at least a year passes across the classic era. And in Issue 6, Sonic describes Adventure 2's events as way back, suggesting multiple years have passed across the modern era too. I know Infinite said it had been decades in Forces, but that, famously, is a weird mistranslation, and the Japanese script was a lot more vague. My original calculation goes thusly. While Sonic's age has been fairly consistent, Amy's has not. The Japanese Sonic CD manual says that Amy is 8 years old. In the modern era, she was listed as 12 when Sega bothered to list that. This gives us a decent framework for Sonic's age, given how early Amy debuts. Obviously, these calculations won't be consistent with every character, Sonic himself was 16 originally, but what else do we use beyond pulling numbers out of our arses? So, if Amy has aged around 4 years between CD and the modern day, then Sonic was 11 when he started out. Broadly, we can use Generations being an anniversary special where Sonic ages to mark new years, along with the era transition, since that's the firmest indicator of time passing aside from literal birthdays. We'll mark the occasions with the big mainline adventure of each anniversary year, or closest approximation. The 5th anniversary has The Fighters, Blast, and 3D Blast, but with Mania, an anniversary game that released the year after the anniversary, coming right after, I think we can place Mania as Sonic's first adventure as a 12-year-old, and Generations as his last as an 11-year-old. It really makes his future self's last words to him quite poignant.
Hey Sonic! Enjoy your future! It's gonna be great!
While not released on the anniversary year, Forces is absolutely an anniversary game, and with the relatively few games released between Generations and Forces, we can say Sonic's capture was about 6 months after Generations, and his return is around his 17th birthday. Frontiers is also an anniversary game that dropped the following year, and marks a shift towards more mature storytelling, even down to Sonic's tone being more restrained. Good point to break up the post-Forces era with another year passing. This way Sonic is 11 from Sonic 1 to Generations, 12 from Mania to the anniversary specials, 13 from Pocket Adventure to Shuffle, 14 from Adventure 2 to Rush, 15 from Sonic 06 to Chow Tales, 16 from Generations to the Forces time skip, 17 from Forces proper to Misadventures, and 18 from Frontiers to now. And with that done, we can finally pick out a place for the Chaotix Special's past portion. The Chaotix are swamped with missing persons cases after Metal Virus, so let's move it further along. Just to avoid complicating the flow of the issue 50 build-up, I'll put it just after Zeti Hunt. And just to cap off, Silver's future constantly changes, so let's talk about all of those. First, we have the Iblis future, seen in Sonic 06, where Iblis burns the world and reigns over the ruins. This future is erased when Elise snuffs Solaris out. The second is presumably a decent one, since Silver doesn't really discuss it in Rivals to my recollection. By the time of the sequel, he's in the Ifrit timeline, which is effectively the same as the Iblis one from the sounds of it. This one is erased by the heroes ruining Eggman Nigel's plans. Color's DS, while not canon, has Silver claim his future is much better now, which appears to be canonical given how his next few appearances aren't tied to him trying to change it. It's thrown into disarray by the war in Sonic Forces, creating a future where Eggman wins for good and everyone lives in fear. Another bad future occurs due to the metal virus, where everyone gets infected and eventually breaks down, leaving the planet a barren, lifeless chunk of metal. This one is solved by destroying the virus. His era is good again as of issue 31, and it's likely to stay that way for the foreseeable future. Silver showing up to stop a bad future is a little played out at this point. Hell, time travel as a whole is played out at this point. I'm not going to discuss the many timeline alterations made via time travel because Sonic 06 alone makes that unfun to discuss. Go watch the original video if you want some of that. Despite how it looks, I do actually have better things to do with my time nowadays. Like revisiting a theory I proposed in the original video 10 years ago and seeing if it still holds up. Obviously, I don't think this is actually what Sega has in mind, but it's fun to speculate. So, Metal Sonic. He debuts in Sonic CD, where he loses to Sonic and is left ruined in Stardust Speedway. Little Planet disappears and won't return for a year. By the time he's retrieved in Sonic 4 episode Metal, we're transitioning into the modern era as indicated by the character designs. So then, who the hell is this? Metal Sonic appears in Triple Trouble, Knuckles Chaotix, Drift 2, Sonic R, and Sonic the Fighters in between those two events, and this is not negotiable because of how firmly set CD and 4's placements are. My theory to explain this back then looked to Rivals 2, where Eggman Nigel introduced Metal Sonic 3.0 from his time. They never addressed what Metal 2.0 was, allowing me to headcanon that there were two identical Metal Sonics. The original left on Little Planet until Sonic 4, and a replacement Eggman used in the interim. This even explained why Metal kept flip-flopping between being loyal to Eggman and plotting against him in the modern era. 2.0 is loyal, but 1.0 became disillusioned after being left to rust on another planet for a couple of years. But does that theory still hold up a decade later? Metal continues to appear in classic era comics, even if any of those other games had been removed from the timeline. In issue 7 of the main book, Metal says his rebelliousness was removed after Heroes and that he and Sonic have clashed since, but it's not specific about which game or games that is. It throws some shade on my theory, but doesn't completely debunk it, since it doesn't account for classic appearances, nor that Metal still has made appearances where he acted against Eggman of his own volition since Heroes. But Sonic Mania seems to have its own ideas. In this game, Sonic returns to Stardust Speedway through the Phantom Ruby and encounters Metal again. It's possible this is all an illusion, but let's assume it's not. Sonic beats Metal's ass again and leaves him there until the next time Little Planet appears. I think the idea the Mania devs had in mind was that this story returns Metal to Little Planet after all those other classic era appearances and leaves him in position to be abandoned for another year until Sonic 4, and that made sense back in 2017. However, as we've established, Seasons of Chaos has to come after Mania Plus, and the Amy special has to come after that, both featuring Metal in between Mania and 4. So there are three ways this can work. 1. Metal Sonic is indeed replaced during the classic era, 1.0 only appearing in CD, 4, and maybe Mania. 2. There is yet another encounter between the two we haven't seen yet, occurring after the Amy special. 3. Episode Metal might not be canon anymore, since the official timeline only shows the covers for episodes 1 and 2, and Metal's only involvement they mention is his fight with Sonic from episode 2. I've considered the possibility that the fight in Sonic Generations somehow allows this to work, Metal being left there after that, but since this has to occur before Mania because of Force's place in Mania's story, it doesn't work. So, what do you think? Are there two Metal Sonics to allow him to keep appearing while he's supposed to be abandoned? Is there a missing piece of the story we're not yet privy to? Has Sonic Team subtly removed episode Metal from the canon to allow Metal to keep showing up in the classic era without conflict? However you feel, our timeline is now complete. Again, if you disagree with any of this, feel free to let me know in the comments. Be civil and I'll discuss it next time I cover the series 10 years from now. It's interesting to compare it to the version I made a decade ago, and not just because the number of stories has essentially doubled from the comics alone. It's been a nice nostalgic throwback, which is a pretty accurate summation of what the franchise is now. It just doesn't feel as stagnant as other IPs that fall into the nostalgia pit. If you do feel like the games have fallen into that, go read the comics. They're really good, the writers clearly know the characters and history well, the dialogue is snappy and often funny, there's really good art for action and for comedy, and the stories are unlike anything the games have done before. But that's not to say the games are bad or anything. They're actually in a really good place right now. Despite all the bad this series has produced, there is just as much good, if not more. I'll never forget the good times I've had with your adventures, and you'll always hold a special place in my heart as a gamer. Happy birthday, Sonic. Oh, and in case you're wondering, if we include the one I'm about to say, I have said the word Sonic 218 times in this video. You're welcome. If you liked this video, why not subscribe and support me on Patreon like these fine people here? You get early access to new videos for just $1 a month. If not, then make sure to share it with your enemies so they can suffer along with you. Today's recommended video is Sonic, damn it, I messed up the count.